Gentlemen, I'm going to call to order our 7:30 hearing. This is on the application of HDMW Randolph Avenue LLC with respect to property that's located at approximately 711 Randolph Avenue, Milton, which property is located in the zoning district Residence A and C. The applicant is requesting a comprehensive permit pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 40B, Sections 20 and 23 as amended to allow the development of 2 three-story buildings with 90 new residential units, 25 of which, namely 23 units, will be affordable for households earning up to 80% of the area median income. All is set forth in the application and plans on file with the board. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight, to my immediate right, is board member Virginia Donahue King, and to my immediate left is board member Jeffrey Mullen. We're tape recording the proceedings this evening so that it's very important, if we have to go to the tape in order to prepare a written decision here, that we know who's speaking. So it may be a little bit tedious, but we'd ask that before anyone speaks that you tell us your name and address. Once you've done that, you could just tell us your name so that we can clearly identify if we need to resort to the tape as to what anyone said and to prepare an accurate decision. Let me just cover a few of the preliminaries for some of the folks who are appearing tonight. This is a larger crowd than normally appeals at the Board of Appeals meetings. They tend to be relatively small and involve only people who have a direct interest in a rather small matter. We don't follow the rules of evidence. We follow the Administrative Procedure Act, so we don't involve cross-examination of witnesses. We try to conduct these hearings as informally as possible, and we want to take the evidence in as coherent a manner as we can and not break it up into various pieces. It's important that we have reasonable decorum at the hearings. These aren't political hearings, so we don't allow signs, banners, cheering, hissing, booing, clapping, or anything like that. And that's never happened in any, except for one instance in my 15 years as chairman of this board. We probably will sit from about 7:30 to about 10 o'clock, depending on where we are with Mr. Caggiano's presentation. We can go beyond that a little bit, but I really don't like to go beyond 10:30 because it tends to be an imposition on the public and sometimes as well as the board. For this particular hearing this evening, we have Attorney Alan Caggiano from Mintz Levin. He's representing the applicant. Mr. Caggiano, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself to everyone so they'll know who you are.
Sure. My name is Alan Caggiano. I'm a real estate lawyer at Mintz Levin. Partner in that group, and been there for probably 12 years.
And we've also received an appearance from Ms. Kathleen O'Donnell, who is special counsel to the town of Milton. Ms. O'Donnell, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you just introduce yourself to everyone?
I'm Kathleen O'Donnell, and I'm a local resident. I'm working with the special counsel to the Board of Selectmen on 40B projects, and this is one of them.
Ms. O'Donnell, let me ask you this. Would you feel more comfortable if we arranged a seat for you at the table here, or do you prefer to sit with your client?
No, I'd certainly could sit at the table. I was leaving that to your discretion.
Okay, then when we finish the preliminaries, we'll arrange to have a seat for you at the table because it's just impossible to try to take notes and balancing them on your knees, okay? Now, let me ask, is there any other attorney present this evening who is representing abutters or other interested people in this application? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Whitten. I represent Joseph Lombardi, who lives on Highland Avenue. And with the chairman's permission, I'd like to address the board.
What's the name?
Fine, and Mr. Whitten, do you, pardon?
Lombardi.
Yes. Do you prefer to stay back in the audience with Mr. Lombardi, or who's ever back there with you, or do you prefer to take a seat at the table?
I'm fine right here, Mr. Chairman, but thank you for asking.
Okay, that's great. Is there any other lawyer who is in attendance tonight who wishes to participate in these proceedings? Okay, the record indicates there's no...
On behalf of a client?
Well, yes, unless they represent... You can represent yourself if you're an attorney, but that's usually considered inadvisable. But I leave that to you.
As an attorney, I know that all too well.
Well, are you an attorney?
I'm a Milton resident here in that capacity.
Okay. Then,
I am an attorney, but I'm not representing a client.
okay, well, if a client hires you, just let us know. And but otherwise, if you want to be heard, obviously you will be heard. When we're dealing with the public in hearings where we have this many people, what we like to try to do is to have the citizenry either submit written correspondence to the board, to submit petitions to the board on various issues. If you think traffic is an issue and 50 people believe that the traffic is inadequate under the present plan, you can certainly file a petition with the board, we'll make copies for the other parties to the case. But we don't want 50 people talking at the same hearing saying the same thing, otherwise we'll be here for until April or May. But on the other hand, I do want to assure the public that you will certainly have the full right to participate in these hearings, even though you don't have an attorney or you wish to represent yourself. Or if you are an attorney and you do want to represent yourself. So, but most of the preliminary work dealing with the application, a description of the issues, a description of the engineering and other concepts will probably be done by professional witnesses, as you'd expect that to be. But if individual members of the public do have questions, you'll certainly have a chance to pose the questions. We don't cross-examine witnesses at Board of Appeals hearings, but if you have a question, the question is addressed to the board, and if the question is appropriate, we'll pose it to Mr. Caggiano or one of his expert witnesses and ask that they answer the question. And as I say, we're delighted to take any written submittals that anyone wants to propound, to submit, and they will be treated just as if you spoke at the hearing. We're on television. Some people are adverse to being on television. They don't feel comfortable. And so writing letters or signing petitions is an excellent way to proceed if you choose to do so. Likewise, I don't know whether we're going to hear from any elected public officials at these hearings. But if we do, we generally take them out of order because they generally have important issues to deal with at night. And sometimes it's an inconvenience. So if we have a public official, it appears, we'll probably take them out of order if they choose to do so, so that they can be heard and we can move on. The process that we're going to follow here is, I think, the usual process for applications like this is, first of all, we're going to hear from the applicant. And the applicant is going to make a presentation. We have a slideshow. Once that begins, we'll move over to the side so everyone will be able to see the visual presentations of the various witnesses, and they can hear. This is usually for TV. I don't think that broadcasts the microphone. It goes into the television system. So if at any time in the proceedings you can't hear the witnesses, just raise your hand and just wave, or just give us some signal, because we want to be sure that everyone has a chance to see the written presentation, the video presentation, and likewise to be able to hear what the witnesses are saying. The acoustics in this room are absolutely terrible in my view, and many times the witnesses, and Mr. Caggiano, for example, he'll have his back to you and he won't be facing you. So if for whatever reason I slur a word, I don't say something that you understand, or I misspeak, or Mr. Caggiano mumbles, don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, I missed that, and we'll repeat that so you'll be able to follow all of the evidence in a clear way. My voice is not strong tonight, but I hope you'll forgive me, and likewise, if I drop my voice a little bit, just take me to task for it. So the purpose of hearing from the applicant first in these hearings is basically to identify the significant issues in the case. Many times we go into cases thinking the significant issues are A, B, and C, and we find out they're X, Y, and Z. So Mr. Caggiano's presentation will indicate what the significant issues of the case are, what his position is on those issues. And that helps us to arrange to have certain aspects of this project subject to peer review. There are issues that the applicant may think are not significant, and we do. On the other hand, there are instances where we may think issues are significant and the applicant thinks they may not be. So, and we'll try to do that tonight by picking some peer review experts, because it's very important to give peer review experts sufficient time to prepare reports and not unduly burden or slow down this proceeding. This is a very difficult time to get professionals to do anything, because we're moving into the holiday season. I guess we're in the holiday season, so we may have some difficulty getting peer review experts, but we'll do our best, and we'll do our best to get them to respond in a prompt manner to these issues. We'll certainly hear from the town officials, and we'll hear from Mr. Whitten, for example, and his client, other abutters who wish to be heard, and then we'll certainly hear from the public interested persons. You don't have to be an abutter to speak at this particular hearing, and we'll be delighted to hear from anybody who wishes to be heard. Mr. Caggiano, I think, why don't you tell us how long do you expect your presentation will be tonight, sir?
I expect it'll be between 30 and 40 minutes.
Okay. And in all of the documents that you, let me do this. What Mrs. Fitzgerald did, and it was really very, very helpful to me, is she prepared a list of the documents that Mr. Caggiano has filed in the various filings that he's made with the board. And I've reviewed it for accuracy. Oh, great, thank you. Why don't you, Mary, would you make sure Mr. Caggiano gets a copy of that? And Miss O'Donnell, I believe it is.
You don't want it now.
What's that? Yeah, I'm fine, Jeffrey, that's okay. Miss O'Donnell, do you have a copy of this document? Okay, well, you should have one. And would you give one to Mr. Whitten as well? And we've got a few extra for the public, but I obviously don't have 30 or 40 copies. I guess my question, Mr. Caggiano, to you is that we did receive a letter in an appearance form and memorandum form from Miss O'Donnell. Did you receive a copy of that?
I did not, no.
You didn't? Okay, well, that's unfortunate. One of the things that happens in these proceedings, regretfully, is people don't understand who are going to be appearing at the hearing and who the lawyers are, and many times the lawyers do not receive all of the documents in the case. But I think this, I think I have an extra of Miss O'Donnell's document. Miss O'Donnell, do you have an extra copy of? Could you give that to Mr. Caggiano? And do you have a copy for Mr. Whitten as well?
I've sent a copy to Mr. Whitten.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And Mr. Caggiano, we also received a letter dated November 26th from the Director of the Department of Public Works of the Town of Milton,
Okay.
which is in the file. Did you receive that?
I did not.
Okay. Well, is that the only one in the case file? I've marked mine up. Why don't we do this? Give this to Mr. Caggiano, but I want a copy of that back in the file before we adjourn. No, he has the first one, just the Town of Milton letter.
You can give this back to me afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
And don't fret, Mr. Caggiano. You're going to have plenty of opportunity to read the letter and
Sure.
to respond to it in an appropriate manner. I had a question for you on one of the documents, Mr. Caggiano, and that deals with the traffic study that you filed with us.
Yes.
When I originally looked at the traffic study, I assumed, but in error, that it was from DeSalle and Burke, because their stationery was the cover page of the letter. But in reading the application, I understand that Mr. David Dulaski, Dr. Dulaski, actually prepared the traffic study.
That's correct.
But I didn't note on the traffic study that he signed the traffic study. In fact, I didn't find his name anywhere on the traffic study.
Huh.
And there's certainly no CV attached to the traffic study.
Okay, I'll take care of that.
And there's no statement of limiting conditions or assumptions. I don't know whether he made assumptions or has limiting conditions that you see in most expert reports. But did you expect to have Mr. Dulaski testifying here?
I do, yes.
Oh, great. Okay, then that...
Here he is, yeah. I'm
Oh,
looking over here.
Mr. Dulaski, nice to see you. I did actually look up your qualifications on the internet, and you're certainly well qualified, and your picture doesn't do you justice on the internet. So just as long as, I don't need a signed document as long as Mr. Dulaski is testifying, but I just I felt very uncomfortable looking at a traffic study that didn't bear your imprimatur, let's put it like that. So it'll be good to hear from you, and that solves, I think, the only technical issue that I had. Do you want to talk very briefly about peer review experts?
Sure.
Because it's difficult to do that at the end of the night. It's probably easier to do it early in the proceeding here. You've told me, and I can tell the public, I think, you filed an application with the Town of Milton Conservation Commission.
That's correct.
And have they had a hearing on this yet, or did they?
We did. We had a hearing a couple of weeks ago. It was extended till December 9th.
Okay, that's great. So in that respect, we probably, I think, don't need an environmental expert. They are our experts, and
Right.
we don't. I don't think you have to go further than that. We probably need a traffic engineer. I think that's probably. It's not. I know Mr. Dulaski doesn't agree with that, but I think most people would suggest that a peer review of the traffic report is probably in order, unless my board members disagree with that. I'd like to run a couple of names by you, because I don't want to start to talk about peer review experts and find out that you've had either a bad experience with them or had a run-in with them, or somehow there's a conflict of interest involved in it. We want to get somebody who has an independent viewpoint. One expert that I would propose to discuss it with is Jeffrey Dirk of Vanasse Associates. Do you know Jeffrey Dirk?
I don't personally.
I do.
You do? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is he in some way conflicted out here with?
I don't know of any conflict. Mr. Dirk does work on other projects that, various attorneys in our firm are involved in.
Okay.
I think he's an excellent traffic engineer.
Yeah, they say he's very excellent, and to be frank about it, and they think you want me to be frank, I'm not sure we can get Mr. Dirk, because I know he's enormously busy. But I'll see if he is available and on a public service. The other expert that came to mind is Robert Michaud, M-I-C-H-A-U-D, of Marlborough, Mass. Do you know Bob Michaud?
Daniel says he knows them.
Good. Yes, you like that? Okay. Yeah, Daniel knows them. I think the preference would be Jeffrey Dirk, if possible.
Okay. And Mr. Michaud, even though you know him, is there any reason perhaps why we should not consider him?
Not that I know of.
Okay, great. So I'll try to get Mr. Dirk involved, and if not, I'll talk with Mr. Michaud and see if we can pin down one of those two people, and with some type of a definitive date when the peer review can be completed. Okay. The other thought was, and I can certainly hear from my colleagues, that one of the issues seems to be the water supply and the public safety aspect of that, and and some other basic development issues. And somebody recommended to me, I've never used any of these experts, to be frank, but somebody recommended Horsley and Witten. And I guess my question is, Mr. Witten, is that your former firm? Or?
It is, Mr. Chairman. I have no ownership interest in the firm and haven't for over 12 years. So the name still remains the Horsley Whitman Group.
Okay, I know they're doing, thank you very much. I know they're doing work on one other 40B application for the town. I've heard they've done good work, but I don't know that. Do you have any problems with Horsley and Witten, if I can get them involved?
Would you mind just letting us know the other two that you're suggesting?
No, I don't have anybody else on
Oh, you
this
don't?
aspect of it. They're more difficult to find than traffic engineers. Do you have, Jeffrey, do you have anybody that you could recommend to do the basic peer review on the engineering, the water?
You saw the one in the paper, right?
They're working for the town.
Or Jenny?
Yeah,
Be,
somebody
so
from,
That's a competitor. Yeah.
Right. And then the ones that were, go ahead.
yeah.
I think it's a conflict on the other one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
with all due respect to Horsley and Witten, we'd prefer a different peer reviewer for that component of the project.
Do you have anybody that you'd like to suggest?
Could I get back to you with a suggestion or two?
Yeah, sure, of course you can. And we'll,
How about Scott Turner at Judith Nitch?
my friend, Mr. Mullen here says that he's dealt with Scott Turner at Judith Nitch and Associates. Does that raise issues? Or?
Have you heard of them?
I
Very
don't know
good.
the firm.
Outstanding.
I know the individual.
He's outstanding.
They do a fair amount of municipal work.
I know they wouldn't.
They don't-
He's a site guy.
Okay.
Yeah, they do traffic, but not him. He's a site guy.
And what was the individual?
Scott Turner.
Scott Turner.
I know
So
Scott.
why don't I give let me take a look at Mr. Turner's resume and
Okay.
give him a call and see if he has any interest in getting involved. Anybody else that, Ginny or Mr. Mullen? No. Okay. Great. So we'll deal with those issues outside of the hearing process and see if we can get them going.
I already did.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Mullen? or-
No, thank
No?
you.
Yeah, Mrs. King? I have nothing further to add in terms of preliminaries. How about you, Mr. Casciano? Is there something that we should be discussing that we're not? Or-
I don't think so. I think you covered it well. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. With that having been said, let's get the board out of the way and give you the opportunity to make your presentation. I think Mr. Casciano said 30 to 40 minutes. That probably means an hour or so, but whatever it is, and we can then see how we'll proceed after that.
Thank you.
Oh, we're going to slide over here. Okay, because yeah, okay. Jenny, watch those cords because they can do.
Want to physically change seats, Sean?
No, just slide down. That's fine. I just want to get out of the.
This is my first one.
Mr. Casciano, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Paul Holland. I'm with the Holland Companies.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Holland.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
meet you.
So tonight, myself and my team are going to be presenting this village-style apartment complex that we've been talking about. This is a project that we've been working on for several years in the planning stages, and we're looking forward to working cooperatively with the board as we move forward in this process. We've already, in cooperation with the planning department, made some revisions to our plans. And a couple weeks ago, we had a Conservation Commission meeting where there was a lot of positive feedback and suggestions, and we're in the process of incorporating some of those suggestions into our the environmental protection measures and so forth that we're working on. Before I introduce all the members of my team, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and our company. So it's we're a second-generation company. We are in construction and real estate. My father started the original construction company 50 years ago, and today it's run by myself and 3 of my brothers. We do residential and commercial construction in all across eastern Massachusetts, and we also own and self-manage an apartment portfolio that is in Boston and the South Shore. Here with me tonight, I have Gary Gartner from Shesky Architects. Milton's favorite engineer, Jim Burke, is on vacation, so we have Jim Dussel Jr. here. Marilyn Newman and Alan Caggiano are our project attorneys. We have Rebecca Bachand is the landscape architect for the project. And then we also have Dan Delaski as the traffic engineer. I think I got everybody there.
Scott.
Oh, Scott, sorry. We have Scott Morrison. He's the wetland scientist with, I apologize, Scott, with Ecotech. Last but not least, we have Lynn Sweet, who is going to be the next person up, and she is the 40B consultant with LDS Consulting Group.
I'm just going to remain seated so I can look at you in the screen if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine.
For the record, Lynn Sweet, LDS Consulting Group, 233 Needham Street, Newton, Massachusetts. Mr. Chairman and board members, I'm pleased to be here. I have over 25 years of real estate development experience and particularly working on apartments and 40B projects. Our goal today is to give you an overview of all the aspects of H&W Apartments. As mentioned, we have about a 35-minute presentation, and we'll appreciate your cooperation as we go through all of our slides. And as Paul mentioned, we are very open to suggestions that you and the audience feel will improve the project and can be achieved in a cost-effective manner. We are very excited about where we are in the process and the evolution of the design and the buildings. And this is an overview of what we're going to cover today. So where are we in the process? We talked a little bit about that in the opening remarks, that we filed a site eligibility. We received a site eligibility letter back in May. Based on feedback that we got from town officials and neighbors, we revised our site plan significantly, and we had that site eligibility letter ratified by Mass Housing. And I believe all of the documents that went in for that filing with Mass Housing were delivered to the Board of Selectmen in the last few days. And I think a copy has also hopefully made its way to you today. We met with the neighbors last winter as well. We're in front of you and for the ZBA. We did have our first wetlands hearing. We got some really good feedback. We're going to be in front of them next week. We also filed an approval not required plan because the site sits between 2 homes, and that's exactly where our access is. So we're trying to separate those lots out. And I think that's it for where we are in the process. We're hoping to construct next year. Very optimistic. I'm just going to try and go through some differences between what was under the site eligibility and what we're giving you today. We are proposing 90 units of workforce housing in 2 3-story buildings. The site eligibility application had 72 units. We are proposing 67 market units and 23 affordable units at 80% of area median income. That is 25% of the units, which is the statutory requirement under Chapter 40B. There will be 43 one-bedroom units, 38 two-bedroom units, and 9 three-bedroom units. So our three-bedroom units only comprise 10% of all of the units, whereas in our site eligibility application, 50% of our units were three-bedroom units. So the total bedroom count that we're proposing today is 146 bedrooms, whereas the site eligibility application had 153 bedrooms. So although we may have more units, the units are smaller and the buildings are clustered closer together. As mentioned, we have 23 affordable units, 10 one-bedrooms, 10 two-bedrooms, and 3 three-bedrooms. The affordable rents will be between approximately $1,171 a month for a one-bedroom and $1,608 for a three-bedroom. When we looked at the housing production plan for the town of Milton on page 30, it mentioned that Milton rents averaged between $1,475 and $3,200. So these truly are affordable for Milton. In fact, our market rate rents that we're projecting today are between $1,500 and $2,600. So in the grand scheme of Milton, even our market rate rents are relatively affordable to that $3,200 amount mentioned in your housing production plan. We are providing modern apartments with all of life's everyday amenities, including a fitness center, passive recreation, under-building parking. In fact, more than 50% of our parking will be under the building, and that's very good for the environment. And we've also included safety features in our buildings that you wouldn't typically find in a single-family home, including a full sprinkler system and an on-site hydrant. Overall, we are proposing a compact, sustainable, affordable housing. The housing's been designed to meet the needs for affordable housing locally and regionally. There are a lot of green features, and our architect will go into that in greater detail. We're looking at zip cars, charging stations. We are only giving one parking space per unit, so if someone wants a second unit, they're going to have to pay for it. Hopefully that will encourage people to look at public transportation as an alternative. We also believe that the property, as I mentioned, meets the local and regional need for affordable housing, and in fact, the town has recently completed a housing production plan. And we've taken a few quotes out of that housing plan, and we believe that our project fits in exactly with some of the needs that were mentioned in that housing production plan. In fact, the housing production plan says that 34% of all households in Milton cannot afford the lowest rent in Milton. That's over 1/3 of residents. And, you know, we believe the town's done a great job of providing some housing choice for seniors. You have Fuller Village, you have Unquity House, but you really don't have any housing choice for young and middle-aged professionals. And really, that's what this housing is going to add. As noted, there have been sharp decreases in this particular population, the 20 to 35-year-old population. And it's not because they don't want to live here, it's because they can't afford to live here. We also are providing what what you referred to in your housing production plan as right-sized housing. As mentioned previously, we have 43 one-bedroom units and 38 two-bedroom units. And our unit sizes are significantly smaller than you would find in a single-family home. Our one-bedroom units are around 750, our two bedrooms around 1,100, and our three around 1,300. A typical single-family home is going to be 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. So we're providing this housing, again, in a very compact, right-sized manner. So I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Gary Gardner, who is our architect, and he's going to speak more about how we fit into the community, what the buildings look like. I'm sure everyone's anxious to hear about that, and some of the green aspects we're offering.
Yes, Mr. Mullen, do you have a question of the witness?
Do we ask questions as we go along? How do you want to
You can do whatever you like.
I have just a fundamental question.
Sure.
And that is, can you identify for us when you're presenting information that's going to change?
I don't know that answer.
So we heard that we heard at the top that the application has already changed and that there are more changes coming?
No. No,
Well, then I'm confused.
I apologize. I was pointing out that when the site eligibility application was approved by Mass Housing last May, they approved a 72-unit project, and between that time and our filing with the ZBA, We amended our plans because we were told very strongly that there were too many 3-bedrooms, as well as there was concern over where the buildings were sited. So we went back into Mass Housing with a 90-unit plan, and we received from Mass Housing basically a ratification letter saying that we agree with all of the findings in our site eligibility. And that information is what was included in the ZBA package. The 90-unit development is what you have in front of you today. I was simply trying to bring you and the audience up to speed as to the changes from when we were at the site eligibility stage to where we are today.
Okay. So that was one set of the changes. There was another set of changes as a result of the Concom meeting from last week. Are there going to be changes to anything that you told us or will tell us based on the Concom?
For me, no. The Conservation Commission changes are, if you have a drainage line going this way, maybe you should add a second one. So those are the kinds of changes that they're providing. Maybe instead of using one kind of a culvert, you should use another culvert. So I actually didn't speak at the Concom, and sure there's someone else that can answer those questions. But
At some point, will those be in front of us?
Absolutely. I suspect anything that's going into the Concom is going to be copied to you, because ultimately, you're going to be you're going to be writing the decision that will include the Conservation Commission findings.
Yeah, I don't want to copy to us. I want to know whether or not the basis of the presentation is going to be including whatever is going on in front of the Concom, that's all.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Everything that you've seen and what the ComCon has seen and what's in front of you is the latest and greatest of everything.
Right.
That may change throughout the process as we have hearings.
That's the question. So when do we find out about that?
Well, we just began the ComCon process, had a meeting, a hearing a couple of weeks ago. So, as we have another hearing with them and they're making suggestions that we want to incorporate into the project, then we'll update the plans and resubmit them at that time. But we don't know at this point what those changes are going to be.
But those changes aren't going to change, the information I gave you as to the unit count, the affordability, the number of buildings, and all of that. They're of a much deeper technical nature, I guess.
So that feels confusing to me. I'm sure we can get over it. What would help me, at least, I don't know if I'll speak for the other board members, is when we come to an item that is also, because we don't go to the Concom.
Sure.
When we come to an item that is also in front of the Concom, if you could just let us know that this item might change depending upon the outcome of the Conservation Commission deliberations, that would be helpful. We can make a note, and then it won't be confusing when the changes come in, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mullen. I think that in light of the discussion about change, I may have been remiss in not reading a letter that Mr. Holland sent to the board. And I'm going to read that letter. It's part of the application process here. It's the November 6, 2014 letter. And it explains the reason for the change in the present application vis-a-vis what was approved by the state regulatory authorities previously. The letter is dated November 6, 2014, and it's to the Board of Appeals, and it's from Paul Holland, the manager of the applicant. And he says, we're pleased to submit our General Laws Chapter 40B application to the Zoning Board of Appeals for 90 units of multifamily housing to be located on Randolph Avenue in Milton. Enclosed, please find the application materials in the table of contents, and we'll provide the fees. Then he gets to the pertinent part. Please note that in response to the request by the town of Milton to reduce the number of 3-bedroom units included within our initial development proposal, the enclosed development plans include plans that have been revised since the issuance of the Mass Housing Project eligibility letter dated May 27, 2014. The changes to unit count and type reflected within the enclosed materials have been discussed at length with the town planner, William Clark. We have already met with and provided Mass Housing with documentation relative to the revised development, and we have obtained a letter from Mass Housing, a copy of which is enclosed, reaffirming the initial project eligibility letter, indicating that the findings required to be made by Mass Housing when it's issued its initial project eligibility letter remain unaltered. A list of the documentation containing the revisions to the original application to the mass housing for the initial project eligibility letter can be found at tab 13 of the table of contents. The changes to the development reflected within the enclosed application will provide additional affordable housing units addressing the immediate pressing and local and regional need for affordable housing in the town of Milton. The revised development plan is consistent with the town of Milton's recently approved housing production plan as explained in the closed materials. While we believe that we would not be prohibited in locating the development within the easement area currently encumbering the development site, we have nonetheless moved all buildings and associated basement-level structured parking outside of such easement area in order to accommodate the expressed concerns regarding the same. We look forward to meeting with Mary Fitzgerald and the other representatives and to presenting our application before the board. Thank you for your consideration and time. And it's signed Paul Holland. So that may explain the reason for the change. So Mr. Caggiano, why don't you proceed with your presentation?
Great. Hi, my name is Gary Gardner. I'm with Shesky Architects. Our offices are in Quincy, Massachusetts, at 14 Franklin Street. We've been in business since 1981, so do the math, it's a long time. We have a varied practice, but currently the market seems to be a lot of projects like this, so we do a lot of residential projects throughout southeastern Massachusetts, primarily within a 10-mile radius of Quincy. And I will walk you through in very broad strokes our understanding of the project, what we feel is important, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of detailed questions that may come later, but we'd like to move this along quickly and just cover the high points. And I'd like to start with just a broad overview of where we are relative to the rest of Milton. And what you see on the screen here, this circle is a 2-mile radius that's centered on the project site. On the subject project, which is not on that side of the street, it's actually on this side of the street, between the two arrows for the within that 2-mile radius, there are all the accommodations that residents need for living. For living space, there's convenient access to shopping, recreation, municipal facilities, medical facilities, religious resources, all convenient to this residential, proposed residential developments. So we feel this is an excellent choice for this kind of proposal. There's transportation. Is this the button here? Wrong button. Immediately adjacent to the site, if I go back to that slide once again on the red side there are 2 arrows that are pointing to the bus stops. They're essentially bus stops at the intersections on the north and the south locations above and below our site. There are 3 bus stops. There's bus number 240, 245, MBTA that bring you to either Quincy or Ashmont Station, and then there's a Brockton Area Transit number 12 that I understand runs quite frequently, 5 to 10 minutes during the weekdays.
I don't think it stops there, though.
It doesn't stop there. Okay, misinformation, I apologize for that. Right.
Stops the hospital.
Okay.
The bus stop that you showed on the north, which side of the road is that on? Is that on the left or the right-hand side?
It's on the left-hand side.
It's on the left-hand side, the side the project is on.
Correct.
And that bus stop is, what kind did you say?
That's
Those are only T stops.
those are T-buses.
Okay, that would be the T-bus that's going in a southerly direction.
Correct. And then on the other side, the other bus going in the northerly direction is down towards the, was it Reed End Access Road? That's south of the site.
And that's on the other side of the road,
On
is
the
it?
right-hand side.
The right-hand side of the road.
That's correct. All right.
Sorry, why don't you continue?
Right. I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. I know you want to get through this, but this is a good question, and I think it would help to just clarify where the 240 and where the 245 stop, the northbound barrel in on the southbound. The 12 doesn't stop. It only goes to the hospital, and I don't think you're not representing that's the hospital stop, so it would give a little texture to that.
Thank you for that. So moving along to the next slide, just a broad overview of the way we look at the property and how to use it. Randolph Avenue is on the bottom here. There are 6 or 7 mostly ranch-style single-family homes at the bottom of the site. To the right is the Milton DPW, and all around the other sides of the site are single-family homes. Our access is directly off of Route 28. It'll be between residences at 711 and 693 Randolph Avenue. An easement of some sort will be created to gain a single driveway access up to the site. In general, the site is high on the back and low down on the bottom here behind the homes on Randolph Avenue. So there's significant topography. It's over 60 feet from the highest point down to the lowest points. North is this side, south is over here, so east and west. I'll use those compass directions as I talk about the building, so I just want to make that clear. And it gives us kind of an understanding of how the sun's going to move around on the site. On the site, we've located 2 buildings. There's a 30-unit building. There's 30 apartments in let's call it the west building on top, and the east building, there are 60 apartments. In between the 2 buildings is open parking. There's 73 spaces on the surface. In addition to the parking on the surface, the access to the parking in the garages is at the ends of these 2 buildings. So you go in under the building, the parking is in the basement of both buildings. So you drive under the buildings and park in the enclosed parking garages. Also on the site, there's recreational areas. We have a recreation space immediately adjacent to where the amenity space will be in the building. And then we have-
approximately what size that space is? It's hard to figure out here.
Okay. Which side would it?
The smaller rectangular area that you said is a recreational space. What are the dimensions of
Okay,
that, more or less?
that's about 50 by 30 feet. And then we have another remote location space, which is this green arm extending out towards the north of the site. And that one's about 50 by 100 feet.
And how far is that from the small rectangular space?
Okay, between the 2
Approximately.
is about 100 feet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And they're just going to be vacant recreational areas, or you're going to have amenities like slides and...
Probably a tot lot, I would imagine, something like that, yeah.
The one closest to the building would be more the tot lot, and the one remote would be more open, passive, recreational type of space.
And then the reason for locating the recreational areas in the area that you did is because of wetland considerations? Is
That's
that
part of it, yes. Okay.
So before you get off this slide, you said that the access would be via an easement, but is not the black line the site that the
No.
applicant owns in fee?
Could you?
It is, I can address this. The applicant owns the 2 single, I have a microphone here, thank you, Lynn. Applicant owns the 2 single families on either side of the access drive.
So that's 713 and 693?
7-Eleven and 6.
7-Eleven.
Yep.
Okay.
And we've filed an A&R plan to take a piece of 7-Eleven, the rear portion of 7-Eleven essentially, to add on to the development site.
The rear portion?
Yes, you can see where the black line is behind
The
7-Eleven.
northerly portion?
I think it's, what is the top west?
The top
The site faces
north and
east.
south.
Yeah, so if you see 7-Eleven, the house just to the left of the access drive, the property line right above it, the property from there up is currently part of 7-Eleven, but we're trying to combine that into the project site through the A&R plan.
Around where the dash line is?
No.
The triangular piece of land.
The dark black line.
Yeah, it's like this 7-Eleven currently kind
Oh, it does.
Exaggerated a little bit, but something like that, so
Good thing we have a backup.
So the rear portion of that walkway.
Okay, so, so if this were to represent all of the property that the applicant owns in fee, it would include 693, the driveway, and what's shown as 7-Eleven, and then all of the land within the black, the dark black line. Is that right?
That's correct. That is owned or controlled essentially by the applicant.
Oh, yeah, there's one
a
a
variety of
closely
different-
held organization that's not the same.
That's
But,
correct.
yeah.
That are the ownership entities.
So when you submit the A&R to the planning board, do both 7-Eleven and 693 remain conform?
693 remains the way it is. Nothing's being...
Remains, the way- so
yeah,
you're just taking a piece of 7-Eleven?
That's correct.
Does 7-Eleven retain compliance with zoning?
I'm not sure. I haven't analyzed the underlying zoning for 7-Eleven, but the A&R plan that we submitted does comply with the requirements for A&R plans, which is essentially access to a public way and frontage.
Yeah, okay.
I believe it would maintain all the dimensional requirements required by zoning, otherwise it wouldn't be an A&R.
Or you'd be in front of us for a whole nother reason.
Right.
Yeah.
We'd welcome that.
Thank you.
The driveway, is that really a driveway? This town's not going to have any involvement in that, right?
It'll be a private way.
Private way, yeah.
Driveway, not a private way.
The
Private way.
Yeah, the access way into the site?
It's a driveway?
Yes, yes, yeah,
Okay.
not a public way.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving along to the next slide. This is really just talking about what the intention is here in terms of program and goals. We want, in the two buildings, we want to essentially reiterate what we just talked about. We wanted to provide 90 apartments of a unit mix of mostly one-bedrooms and two-bedrooms. We have 43 one-bedroom apartments, we have 38 two-bedroom apartments, and we have 9 three-bedroom apartments. So if we do some percentages, that's about 48% one-bedrooms, 42% two-bedrooms, and 9% three-bedroom apartments. As mentioned in the beginning by the chairperson, 25% of these apartments will be affordable, so that 25% of 90 works out to be 23 affordable apartments. Part of the program that we envision for this project is to create some amenity spaces within the building, so there's common recreational spaces interior to the building. We need a leasing space, we need a marketing space, we need property management space, and as I mentioned already, we have outdoor recreation space. And the intangible here is we want to create a sense of neighborhood for this proposal. So this is a very hard image to see. Unfortunately, it's ghosted out. I'm sorry it doesn't read very well. But this image is just, for us, kind of a conceptual idea about the community plan. And the smaller building on the western edge of the property is on the highest point of the property, and the easternmost building is on the lower part of the property, and the property steps down. In fact, the first floor of the higher property is 10 feet below the highest point at the property line at the extreme western edge of our parcel. But what we're trying to do is create kind of a village feel, establishing a neighborhood. And so by combining the two buildings together, twinning the buildings together, we're creating a kind of an internal focus. And we want most of the activity to happen between the two buildings. And we also wanted to break the buildings up into shapes that are recognizably residential. So you'll see a lot of pitch roofs and decks and residential materials on the outside of the buildings. In more detail.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure. Sorry.
You indicate you want all the activity within the confines of the building area, but that's almost by definition because there's no other place to go, isn't? Isn't that right?
Well, there are exterior spaces in this common area between the buildings that will be used by the residents, but
It seems to me you have two buildings in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Are there sidewalks here anywhere, or am I missing something?
let's go back a little bit. Wrong way. So on the site plan, here's the two buildings. There's a triangular piece of land here. That's probably 30 feet by 75 feet.
What's
it's
the purpose of that? Is it just architectural, or it's not a
outdoor-
play area?
It's outdoor green space.
Okay.
Yeah. You
But it's
could-
not a dedicated recreation area? is
You
that
wouldn't
what
go out there and play Frisbee, but you might go out there and sit under a tree and read a book or something. You know, it's whatever the residents want to make of it.
So where are the sidewalks, if there are any?
So if you are walking to the bus or you're coming home from the bus, or you want to walk down the street, there's a sidewalk, of course, on Randolph Avenue, and there's a sidewalk that goes up the left side of the driveway here, and then you can walk to the entrances of the two buildings. There's an entrance to that building there and one here.
Well, if you'd like, I'll touch upon that when I get to the site plan.
Okay.
I can address that for you.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask you a few more questions?
Absolutely.
As long as my voice holds out. And I don't know how to express this because I'm not an engineer and I'm not an architect. But do you know the elevation of the tree line to the, on that westerly line as it presently exists?
Yeah.
Before any construction activity?
It's approximately elevation 160.
That's the top of the trees or the grade?
No, I'm not the top of the trees, but the ground. I misunderstood
Okay,
you.
the ground is elevation 160.
Right.
Okay, and how about the trees that are on that westerly portion of the property?
I couldn't.
The survey crew is actually spent today and tomorrow locating hopefully all the trees on site. So that's something we'll be able to get to you.
So do you have an idea or a guesstimate whether the height of this building on the westerly side, as it's proposed, which I think is, and I don't have my notes here, I thought that was 4.5 stories or something like that?
Well, there's a slide that will follow very shortly that will describe exactly your.
Is that above the tree line or at the tree line or below the tree line?
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Until we know what the height of the tree line is, I can't accurately answer that question.
Well, you could go out onto the site and look at the trees and figure out how far
Exactly.
a 4.5-story building is, but you don't know that.
I couldn't estimate that unless,
I think one of the
Survey crew was, I wasn't out there.
The grade is sloping significantly down in this direction too, so we're kind of, the buildings are somewhat cutting to the slope a little bit there as well.
Do you know when you anticipate having that additional information?
For the Concom, right?
Yeah, for the Concom, we're shooting to have it for next Tuesday's Concom meeting.
Okay, so it'll be available within a reasonable time, but then we can deal with that issue. Is it your intent, to the extent possible, to shield the residences that are on the westerly portion of your property, to shield your buildings from those residences?
We're going to do the best we can to kind of preserve as much as the natural treescape as possible along the back to provide them a buffer.
And I may be going way ahead of myself here, but because I'm not a contractor. But this particular drawing to me, I understood that the property, which I have not walked, and maybe I don't want to walk it, you could tell me whether it's walkable or not, like it's the forest primeval, looks like it's been deforested of trees. Is it the intent of the developer to maintain as much of the natural, I'll call it trees or forestation, as possible in order to shield those houses on the westerly side?
I mean, it's going to make a nicer complex for us, but we don't want to clear the entire site. Certainly where the bulk of the building area is, that has to be cleared. But once we get outside of that and we get towards the property edges, we're going to, everywhere we can, we're going to maintain the existing trees.
And do you agree with me that this particular, I'll call it a sketch, as opposed to a plan, doesn't deal with that issue? It doesn't deal with the issue of preservation of as many trees on the site as you can. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't think they're all.
They show no
You might
trees. It
have
looks
to-
like it's been laid waste for this year. Look at that. So are you going to provide us with information regarding the trees that are going to be kept? And
We will.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the items we're talking to the Conservation Commission about specifically. So we'll absolutely provide you with the information as we receive it.
We've had previous applications, not dealing with 40B, but dealing with these telecommunications towers, where the siting of the tower near residential developments is a matter of concern. And we've had instances where the applicant has balloon balloon tests or something to basically show where the proposed height of the tower would be in relation to nearby residences, and then the residences can get an idea as to how they would be able to observe the tower above the tree line. And I guess, do you anticipate doing something like that as part of this project, or?
You know, I'd never heard of something like that. I mean, we certainly consider it. It doesn't seem like it's too.
Okay, so you'll leave that open for the present time, because I think that's an important consideration for certainly the abutters on the west. So I'm sorry to have interrupted your presentation. Why don't you go on?
Sure. Let's see what we can pick up here. Okay, so the village view, and we left off, you were asked about some green space in front of the western building there, that it's green space, it's available for the residents, it's just a nice place to
But
be.
this is not a construction plan. This is a conceptual drawing. Is that what we're dealing with here?
This is an accurate representation minus the details, but, you know, the shapes,
Well,
the sizes.
what do you call the details? Do you call sidewalks details? I don't see any sidewalks there. Maybe you do.
You don't see any sidewalks in this particular view, but what you do see are the roof slopes. You see the balconies and decks. You see the variation of some of the building shapes, and they turn and they bump out from the rest of the building. That's accurate in representation of what's intended here.
Yeah. Can I ask you this? Is it fair to say that because of the presence of the wetlands on the site and because of topographic issues, the site is constrained for you to provide the normal sidewalks that you'd provide on a development if you had the choice to do it?
No, I think we've got the sidewalks that we would typically have on a development like this.
Well, where are the sidewalks on that picture?
So if we go back to this tiny little plan,
Can't get off this
so
plan.
this light
Just
yellow-
keep it here for the rest of the night.
Yeah, right. This is a sidewalk.
Well, I mean, I want to see where. I don't want to see people get run over by cars, so usually you have sidewalks to
Yeah,
protect
so
them.
there are sidewalks on both sides. There's a
Where's-
sidewalk on this side as well that goes from essentially from Randolph Avenue all the way up to the front door of each building.
Okay.
Yeah, on both sides of the, once you get inside this area. on
Where's
both
the
sides.
sidewalk on the westerly building? I don't see it.
It's this yellow, immediately adjacent to the building. Straight.
Outside of the entrance to the building.
Yeah, the entrance to that building is right there.
Why wouldn't you provide more sidewalks? Would it just constrain the flow of traffic or the movement of traffic on the site?
I think there's adequate sidewalks
Okay.
to safely get the residents from the public street up to their front door without.
Is that a particular
having any
concern if you have children in the apartment complex,
Sure.
having adequate sidewalks to
Yeah.
protect them?
But once again, we do have sidewalks all around both buildings.
All around both buildings?
Not all around the
You don't-
backs.
you don't
but,
mean that.
uh,
You have some
around
on the front.
fronts of both buildings, if you want to.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You have two buildings here.
Correct.
The building on the east,
Yes.
is that building as long as the football field?
It's about that long, yes.
And that's a 4.5-story building, is it?
It's a 4-story building, yes.
With 2 levels of parking below, or is it
One
1.5?
level of parking below.
How many?
One level,
1 level below.
right.
With 60 units. Your first development, which was only 72 units,
Correct.
you had 3 buildings, and the buildings were, looked to me like they were equal sized.
There were, yes,
Yeah, and they contained the same number of units, to the best of my recollection.
but there were 72, this is 90.
Yeah, 72, yes. So why didn't you do 3 buildings here? Was there some reason from an architectural and engineering perspective that required a 60-unit building?
Sure.
What was that reason?
The more buildings you have, the more site area it takes because you need space between buildings. So if we had 3 buildings on the site, even though they'd be 3 smaller buildings, they would create more, take up more site area, create more impervious area, and requires to spread out the developed property. So this is actually more efficient in terms of usage of the land without paving more. You'd
Well,
have
you
longer
should,
driveways.
sure, but you could build one big building, and I guess that would be more efficient. It would just be a disaster.
Right.
Can you point, if we take that 60-unit building as ground zero, where can you show us anywhere within 5 miles of that building where there's a similar building that's 100 yards long containing 60 units of residential development? Does that building exist anywhere in Milton or in Randolph or in any of the surrounding communities?
I'd have to do some research on that to get.
Is that a consideration for this application?